Thank you very much indeed. I should say just before I came down the steps and into the building, my mind does always say to me, avoid the bad photo opportunity. Anyway, I'm just coming down the steps into the building when out pops this woman from an office and says, "Can I have a picture?" So the camera's rolling, I have my picture with her. I said, "What do you do?" She says, "I'm from the job search agency." She says, we help people with their future careers. She says, don't worry about it. She says, there are no skills needed. Anyway, Cyril, many thanks to you for having me here again today. I remember that train journey very well. Incidentally, I remember too that before I accompanied you on that train journey, there were one or two people that said to me, "Watch that, Cyril, you know." And I said to them, "Why?" They said, "He's absolutely obsessed, you know." I said, "Oh, what's he obsessed with?" "It's school standards." I said, "Well, I think that's maybe our man then." And what you've done over these past years has been absolutely remarkable, committed and remarkable, and thank you for it. And of course, alongside you has been Liz, the inestimable Liz, who has done just a great job again as Chief Executive of the Trust. And thank you for everything you do, because I know that we sit there and take the decisions for better or for worse, but it's people like you who actually implement them. So thank you, Liz, very much indeed. Thank you. And finally, if you don't mind, I'll thank my own Secretary of State, Alan. When he was first appointed, there were those that said, well, he left school at 15, so how can he be Secretary of State for Education? And I suggested at the time that maybe because he had been one of the ones who left school at 15, it was very suitable that he was Secretary of State for Education, because he would know how much it mattered. But just on the way up here, again on the train, he was telling me about the occasion. It shows the class differences even in the trade union movement from where Alan came. When he was in the Post Office Workers' Union and went on a demonstration with the Association of University Lecturers. And Alan and his friends were all marching with the placards that said, "We want 7% and we want it now." And the Association of University Lecturers, who were campaigning over a differential, had placards saying, "Correct the anomaly." I think you can imagine which was more effective. First of all, I want to say thank you, however. This is now the largest education conference of the year, and the Trust is the most dynamic education organisation in Britain. You are the true change makers in our country today. You are lifting the sights of our young people, you're teaching them better, educating them more profoundly and to a higher standard than ever before our country's history. It's an amazing achievement, and thank you, all of you, very much for the work that you do. You know, I probably visit more schools than any Prime Minister before me, and I enjoy it. And I've learned something as well. The moment I walk in through the doors of a school, I can feel what it's like. Not simply the buildings or the staff, but the spirit of the school. I meet the first pupils, and you can tell right from that moment whether they're eager and they're up for it, whether school is something they go through, or whether it's something they know is touching and shaping their lives. I think being a teacher must be one of the hardest jobs in the world. And Bernard Shaw was wrong, because teaching is doing. But when I meet young people in a school that's going places, I get some of the buzz of what it must be like to be a teacher, what makes people do a job as hard as that. And I believe that education is the most precious gift a society can bestow on its children. And when I said the top 3 priorities of the government in 1997 would be education, 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 I knew then that changing educational opportunity was the surest way to changing lives, to social justice. And I'm as certain of that today, possibly more so, as I was 10 years ago when I said it. I knew too that there had been chronic underinvestment in the service. I could see that in the numbers of schools in an awful state of disrepair, in the fall in teacher training places, in the fact that almost half of 11-year-olds and way over half of 16-year-olds failed to get to the requisite grade. But I also knew that it wasn't just about money. I could also see School A in an area of social deprivation doing well and School B in a similar area doing badly. And I could see some schools, indeed some whole areas, where whatever resource was put in, without radical change in leadership, nothing was going to get better. But if I'm frank, I've also learned from the experience of trying to make things work, doing rather than, as in opposition, talking. And at first, I put a lot of faith in century-driven improvements in performance, and undoubtedly, incidentally, without that, we would never have got some of the immediate uplift in results. But over time, I have shifted from saying it's standards, not structures, to realizing that school structures can affect standards. Your organization's strength today is in one way testimony to that. And above all, I perceived how, as we tried to make reforms and met strong resistance, there was a kind of deadly false choice that often wrenched political debate about education off a sensible path and down a cul-de-sac. The debate frequently proceeded as if at every turn there was a choice between excellence and equity. I mean, I truly had genuine and well-meaning people telling me, if you improve this school or that in an area that is an educational desert, you will cause terrible problems. Like what, I used to say? Well, the parents will all be wanting to send their children there, they would say. The other schools will suffer. But the children are suffering now, I would reply. And that was the extreme end of it, it's true, but in a more moderate way. In every change made, from specialist schools through to city academies, of course, trust schools, there was an assumption that difference meant inequity. Yet what is obvious is that different is what each and every child is. Of course, some things have to be set to a uniform standard. It's wise to have a national curriculum, to have inspections, albeit of a lighter touch, to publish results, to have policies, some policies in common in every school. But the key to education today is to personalize learning, to recognize different children have different abilities and in different subjects. However, personalizing learning is not just about a distinctive approach to every child, it is also reflected in a distinctive approach to every school. It is about schools feeling ownership of their own future, the power and the responsibility that comes from being free to chart their own course, experiment and innovate, doing things differently. The decision makers in their own destiny, not the recipients of a predestined formula laid down by government. This is what you do. And hence, not just the investment, but also the reforms in structure. And I think the path is now clear toward greater independence, but so is the guiding spirit of the changes, the belief that only through the pursuit of excellence can equity be achieved. Only through schools being free to personalize learning can a child really be given the education suitable for them? So today I want to reflect on what has been achieved so far, but then say what further changes are needed in the way we teach, but also in school structures themselves. And first of all, I do think occasionally we should celebrate the success that our schools have had. In the Ofsted report recently, you might not have noticed that it actually did say that school standards have been rising significantly in the past few years. And I say this with the greatest of respect, if not affection, for our media people present. Occasionally, if we, occasionally if we devoted just even a tenth of the publicity to the things that are happening and are going well in our schools as to the things that are going badly, I think we'd all feel a lot better about the education system. Although you do get asked for some bizarre things occasionally. One head teacher I met a few weeks ago, she was berating me, saying to me, "Why don't you get some decent publicity for our education system?" And I said, "Look, madam, if I could do that." Anyway. But we have had huge success. English 10-year-olds are now ranked 3rd in the world for literacy. There are 84,000 more pupils leaving primary school this year that can read and write properly. 96,000 more children can do the basic mathematics, all in the last 10 years. 2006 saw the best ever primary school results, and primary schools actually in the poorest areas have improved at double the rate of schools in the more affluent areas. Funding per pupil has doubled. Capital investment is 6 times what it was. There are some 36,000 more teachers, twice as many support staff, and actually the real thing is when you go into a classroom, it can look unrecognizable as to how it was years ago. Twice as many computers as there were, and interactive whiteboards and broadband technology are changing the way pupils learn. The success, however, for you in the Specialist Schools Trust has been remarkable. There are 27% more pupils in specialist schools that achieve 5 good GCSEs than in other non-selective schools. And that's an advantage, incidentally, that remains strong even on a value-added basis. Across academies, 40% of pupils this year achieved the 5 good grades, compared to 30% in 2004. Key Stage 3 results in English and Maths are rising rapidly too. More than 1,500 previously failing schools have been turned around, and where there were over 500 failing schools after the first Ofsted inspections, today there are just over 200. 200 too many, of course, but better than before. We've achieved the best ever GCSE and A-level results. And where there used to be 600 schools with fewer than a quarter of pupils getting 5 good GCSEs, today there are barely 60. Where there were barely 80 schools with over 70% 5 good GCSEs, today there are nearly 600. Indeed, 10 years ago, 170,000 GCSEs candidates took their exams in local authorities where fewer than 40% of pupils gain 5 good GCSEs. Today, none does. And in London, only 2 of the 13 inner London boroughs achieved 45% or more pupils with 5 good GCSEs. Today, all do. The number of failing schools is less than half of what it was. And this is despite the recent raising of the bar and short notice inspections by Ofsted. Let me give you just 2 examples of schools doing remarkable work. Shireland Language College in Sandwell. It serves a deprived area of Smethwick. Half its pupils speak a language other than English at home. In 1997, the school had 1 computer for every 36 pupils, no partnerships with other schools, and just 8 full-time support staff. It had a $220,000 budget deficit. Today, it's thriving. It became a specialist school in 1998. It's just become a foundation school too. It's used government funding to develop one of the most remarkable ICT systems in the country, and now has 1 computer for every 2 pupils. They have a website with homework, marking, curriculum support, and parental information. And Shireland now helps 60 other schools develop similar sites and manages 2 other local schools. Its staff include 59 support staff. And in 1997, just 25% of pupils achieved 5 good grades. This year, 61% do so. 10 years ago, Shireland was rated merely satisfactory by Ofsted. A few weeks ago, under Sir Mark Grundy's leadership, the inspectors called it outstanding. Or take Mossbourne Academy in Hackney. In 1998, Hackney Downs School was so bad that the last government, rightly, sent in a hit squad to close it down. Today, in award-winning new buildings, under what Ofsted called the visionary and astute leadership of Michael Wilshaw, Mossbourne Academy is a school transformed. Where Hackney Downs was shunned by local parents, Mossbourne has 4 applications for every place. The Academy has high ambitions of 70 or 80% 5 good GCSEs, where only 21% used to achieve that grade in the old school. And the school is now open from 8 until 6 every day, with drama, debates, catch-up classes, homework after formal lessons, and gifted and talented programs on Saturdays. These are just 2 examples, but in the audience today, there will be many, many more. So we've come a long way, but as I think you know, there is much more to do. I want to focus on one or 2 of the changes that I still think we have to make. The biggest problem we have faced over the last 60 years, not just the last 10, is vocational education. That's why we are developing a radical new solution with employers, schools and colleges, the specialized diplomas. With 14 diplomas by 2013, but up to 50,000 students starting courses in 2008 in ICT, engineering, construction, care and media, the diploma will be a radically different qualification. Unlike previous qualifications also, employers are actively helping design the diploma, ensuring a strong practical core and basic skills basis for all. Young people with diplomas will be able to progress when they are ready and go on to university or apprenticeships afterwards. And this comes alongside, incidentally, plans for new skills academies in which top companies in the sector help provide high-quality vocational education for young people who know what they want to do at an early age, but they need help to do it in a practical sense. And then there is another challenge. Some young people want to be able to continue with a strong, broad qualification after 16. The International Baccalaureate, as you know, has been growing in popularity to meet that demand. And its growth in recent years has been strongest in state schools and colleges. We believe there should be at least one sixth form college or school in every local authority offering students the choice of the IB. So we will support up to 100 extra schools and colleges and training staff to offer the qualification by 2010. And over time, I hope that we can offer that choice through each of the new 14 to 19 partnerships that are helping to deliver the diplomas. If we are serious about tailoring education to the needs of young people, they should have real choices after 14, strong qualifications with A-levels, diplomas, the International Baccalaureate, and apprenticeships. Now, do not misunderstand me. The majority of students I know will continue to do A-levels and GCSEs, but diplomas and for some IB offer new options. The question then arises, however, what are the best structures within which such personalization and innovation can flourish? You here are the great innovators in our education system. What are the structures in which that flourishes? Now, one of the oddest things in debating education policy is that people often debate it as if no empirical evidence at all existed as to what works and what doesn't. Actually, it is reasonably clear, at least up to a point. A strong head teacher, well-motivated staff, attention to the basics, but also imparting the thrill of knowledge, discipline, good manners and life skills. Schools succeed that have a powerful ethos, sense of purpose, pride in themselves and what they do. And all of this is relatively straightforward, at least to state. But in a sense, it's like saying that what makes a good football team is a strong coach, excellent strikers, midfield and defense, and a high standard of fitness. It's true. These are the right attributes of success, but it is also obvious. The harder question is, what are the structures within which such attributes are most likely to be cultivated. This is the debate which becomes more complex and less consensual, certainly so far as education is concerned. This is where the empirical evidence can collide with preconception and prejudice. And in my judgment, our education system is bedeviled by two political controversies, the kind of charge around it, upsetting an intelligent analysis of what works and what doesn't. The first is the existence of a strong independent sector that people know provides quality education, but because it's fee-paying, is seen as elitist. The second has been the development of the old grammar school and secondary modern system into the comprehensive system. People wanted an end to crude selection, but weren't always satisfied with the resulting standard community school. The last 10 years, and I suspect going back even further, have been an attempt to find a way of calming these controversies, trying to separate fact from prejudice, and extracting the value for modern policy making. And I, in a sense, can share with you the things that I learned doing the job. I mean, I could see from an early stage of government that flexibility and independence from rigid central or local control helped schools gain the sense they were in charge of their own destiny, and thus encouraged their ethos and sense of purpose. It became clear to me that schools that had outside partners that were open to new relationships as well as those of the traditional kind gained from them. It was obvious from the small numbers of CTCs and specialist schools which existed in the late 1990s that a specialist focus helped create energy and stimulate excellence. And above all, I realized school leaders were like any other leaders. They wanted to be free to lead. So yes, independent schools had advantages of money and class, but that wasn't their only advantage. And yes, old-style selection at 11 was misguided, but the recognition of different abilities and aptitudes was not. So in these 10 years, with your help and with many of you as pioneers, we have been creating a new system of secondary education in this country. What was once monochrome is now a spectrum, offering a range of freedoms and pathways. As Cyril's just said, 80% or 85% of secondary schools, not the 8% 10 years ago, are now specialist schools. Many of you are now going for a second specialism. Trust schools offer another way to build on the success of specialist schools. We already have 30 pathfinders with over 50 schools working towards trust status. And the list of organizations involved is impressive, including Unilever and Microsoft and Lang O'Rourke and the Co-op and Exeter and Essex universities and many others. Trusts come in different shapes and sizes. Groups of schools working together with external partners, strong schools helping weak schools to improve, or individual schools strengthening links with universities or business foundations. For those seeking greater autonomy, there are also now fast-track procedures that make becoming a foundation school easier than before. And for those seeking to deepen collaboration, there will also be growing opportunities to develop your school brand and ethos across a range of partners, such as Thomas Telford or the United Learning Trust. And where you need help developing links, the school's commissioner can broker and support partnerships with national companies. We will support a second wave of trust schools, ensuring at least 100 schools are working towards trust status as pathfinders this spring. And then, of course, there is the Academy program with a full range of freedoms. Already 46 are open. The other 150 to meet the 2010 target are now being agreed. Demand, frankly, is already outstripping the target. We're now confident we can double this number, taking it to 400. We will identify the additional schools soon and incorporate them into the Building Schools for the Future program. And the test for academies is clear. Are parents queuing up to get in or get out? And the answer is overwhelming. They want in. The point is that the move to greater freedom and independence, which many of you began, can now be taken forward in a number of different ways. And what is interesting to me from the perspective I have is that in this, schools are like any other institutions today in the public or private sector. The premium today, whether in a successful business or public service, and I know all the differences between the two, but the premium is on the ability to be creative, to adapt and adjust, to internalize external influence and practice. The vision, therefore, is clear. A state sector that is independent, non-fee-paying schools, which remain utterly true to the principle of educating all children, whatever their background or ability, to the highest possible level, but with the freedom to innovate and develop in the way that they want. With your leadership and example, we now have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to forge a national consensus around this vision. And you who have done so much to change education in Britain for the better are those who can translate that vision into practice. What is more, it's interesting that in America, Australia, Scandinavia, Holland, similar models are being developed. Hence your growing international network, which I understand has now been extended to links with Chinese schools. All of this change, therefore, in one sense is very natural. The move in the private sector is away from mass production to customized goods and services. In public services, uniform, monolithic services are on their way out. And in all walks of life, barriers between public and private and voluntary sectors are being dismantled. Workforce demarcations are becoming less rigid. Different skill sets are being called for. I mean, the interesting thing is this happens right across the piece at the moment. For example, advanced nurses in the National Health Service who are doing diagnostics that previously were reserved for consultants. ICT specialized, people who specialize in ICT in police stations or indeed in schools. Classroom assistants or community support officers who help teachers and police. Telemedicine, the use of the internet in teaching. The transformation of forensics by technology. The point is, stay still and you're left behind. I know sometimes over these past years, the pace of reform has been hard and even confusing. But what has motivated me is not reform for its own sake. Throughout, I have felt compelled by